You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Betoota Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Betoota Advocate radio show, recording live here in the Diamantina Shire. Live from my end. Our guest obviously isn't in the studio today. We're talking to John Safran. He's based in Melbourne, and there's an entire infected state between us. So we've got the technology to do it this way, and we're actually going to be talking about the changing technology in today's interview, changing technology in general, because John's just written a book which kind of explores how we've been able to evolve as a people, probably not for the better, because we're specifically talking about tobacco. The tobacco industry has been able to evolve and stay relevant in a way that no one saw really coming. Thank you for joining us today, John Safran.
Thank you, sir. Of course, even if I was there, you'd have to make up an elaborate backstory that I wasn't there, because you're already in enough trouble over all this, the Betoota Advocate's controversial lockdown. Oh,
you've been across it, have you?
Oh, yeah, just briefly, just seen, you're just seeing people, having a go. I'm of course loyal to you.
It's good to get the blood pumping, especially when everyone's at fever pitch. We probably could have waited a couple of days before we ran that angle, but we stand by it editorially. It was not what we thought that people would respond so aggressively to us pointing out that poor governance equals civil unrest. Yep. But they wanted the blood of bogans, and we didn't give it to them.
Yeah, it's all this thing where people are tripping over their own shoelaces, because, as I think you imply, either you implied or someone standing up for you implied that, as soon as the government does a crackdown on a region that's seen as, ethnic minority, then the lefties will be like, oh, why are you cracking down on them? And so the whole thing doesn't really add up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all good to scream racism when there is a specific crackdown on a certain area, but when the affected workers make their way into your otherwise whitewashed urban areas, it's a different story. It's bogans versus us. We've received a lot of vitriolic hate mail over the last 24 hours, but it's good for the soul. We thrive on it in Betoota, and as you do too, John. You've made a career out of betraying your base.
Yeah, but that's because I'm from the olden days of South Park and John Safran and, the fathers of Betoota Advocate. Remember when your dad and your uncle used to do the show before they passed it on to you? It was a bit like those Muppets and Muppet Babies or whatever.
Yeah, I was saying, Dad, you've got to see this bloke down in Melbourne. I think he's onto something. We should appropriate Jewish culture.
There just used to be a reality where, like an unspoken reality, and why is this sounding mad, where you'd read the room of your audience and then challenge your audience, but not in like a mean way or a smart. It's just like, to keep yourself alive and your brain alive, isn't it good to kind of have things that you don't totally agree with, or things you're playing with ideas, or you're being ambiguous? That used to be just the total normal, but now the normal is like, read the room and make sure your comedy matches the room that you've read.
This ain't it, Chief. We've got a lot of that over the last couple of days. And we held the line. We doubled down, then we tripled down again, just to make sure it didn't look like we were backpedaling. But yeah, a bit of fun, Yeah,
a bit of fun.
Because it also prevents you from joining the establishment, which, the narrative was immediately tribalism, us versus them. These people are so much worse than the governments that allowed this to happen.
Yeah, I kind of got the point straight away. So where I knew you weren't in favour of coughing over people when you have COVID, and you weren't in favour of not giving your babies vaccines, for measles or whatever. I got what the idea was. It was that, why are people being blamed when really there's bigger.
I've been thinking a lot actually about the last work you wrote prior to our last chat. You'd written that depends what you mean by extremist. I feel it would be not a very good comparison. This anti-lockdown crowd of, people have been cornered into conspiracy theories and take to the streets. A few people have done that. I wouldn't say that was all of the protesters. There was a lot of people that have lost their jobs. But is there a Venn diagram that, that kind of includes that Patriots Front that you were kind of covering in your book, the Reclaim Australia movement and the freedom movement that we're seeing now?
Well, I know in America when they had those Capitol riots, January, all your friends on Twitter were like straight away like, oh, these white supremacists have taken over the Capitol or whatever. But, that was a layer to it. But there were a lot of QAnon people, and QAnon people are coming from a different place. So, obviously, I think it's people searching for meaning, and people are on their own and spend too much time on their laptops, and we don't have going to church once a week anymore, or going to the mosque or the synagogue once a week anymore, and even football clubs, social clubs, that kind of thing, and people are just looking for meaning. And then it is pretty exciting when you read something new and it just like really stimulates you, and you can get like overexcited and lose yourself in it. I remember a friend of mine, a writer, and she was talking about prisoners and about why do so many prisoners find Jesus when they go to prison, and then they become religious. So either they find Jesus, or in the Quran they find Allah and Muhammad or whatever. And she said to me, she goes, these people, a lot of the people who end up in prison, they've never read a book before. And that's the book that's in prison. Then they read it and they're just so quickly overstimulated and they can't believe it. It really captures their imagination, and they don't understand. They don't put it in the context of, this is great and lots to learn or whatever, but there's other books out there that would equally give you that instant stimulation. And I still get it now. I love it when I hit upon a topic. I won't bring it up, the topic I'm into at the moment, because it just will be this too complicated and whatever. Not too, like, it's just a pretty inflammatory thing to bring up or whatever. But I'm reading this. Okay, I'll tell you. So
tell me, I'm waiting for it.
So I just finished reading this book that was this first-hand account written at the time it was happening from a terrorist who was in a terrorist group in pre-Israel Israel on the Jewish side. He was in this little controversial little radical sect, and his comrades are being hung by the British because they're being caught for being terrorists and blowing up shit or whatever. And it's just like this wild world. I've never thought about that much before, or at all before, and it's just so wild reading this thing in sort of in real time. Like at the moment it was happening, this unapologetic advocate for his brand of terrorism, standing up for his mates who are being hanged, and it's just wild, and it's all biased and inaccurate and stuff like that. So I bring that up because I constantly have that experience of, which surely these people who are in QAnon and other things must have, of just reading something new and it just being so overwhelmingly like vivid and exciting that you can just kind of get lost in it. But luckily I've read other books, so I'm not going to be joining this Jewish terrorist group. If there's any
mandatory British Palestinian,
if there's any colonial British out there who are worried, I'm going to go out there and lob a grenade at you.
The big bombing they did in London, that particular...
In London? No, the King David Hotel, I think, was their most...
King David Hotel.
Yeah, but that was in Israel, and that's what...
Oh, right.
I really wish I hadn't started talking about it, because I want to finish the book before I sound like I know what I'm talking about, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But the premise of the book is that...
A lot of Brits died in that bombing.
Yeah, but that wasn't like this one-off bombing, because Britain controlled the area before Israel was formed, and there were the Arabs and the Jews, and the British were in charge. And then you had like the more mainstream Jews and mainstream Arabs, and they were just trying to do everything the appropriate kind of official way of trying to curry favour with the British. So when Britain or the League of Nations, or when they decide to divide up the land, it'll be favourable to their side. So there was that. But then you had these young...
Firebrands
who are like, no, screw this, on both sides. And I guess everyone's kind of familiar with, or they would go, I've heard of Arabs blowing up stuff or whatever. But on the Jewish side, there was this little group who were they were like terrorists. They said they were terrorists, so it's not even like controversial or anything like that. And they weren't aiming, I guess we all imagine it's like, the Jews attacking the Arabs or whatever, but in this it was like abducting British military and British police and shooting British police and blowing up British things. And they had a real anti-colonial mindset, which is a bit confusing for, I know, anyone who's on Twitter in 2021 of like, hang on, what? The Zionists were against the colonisers? But it's like insane. This is why it's so overstimulating, is because you had these... In this book by this terrorist at the time, he puts some of the speeches that his comrades who are being hanged by the British for being terrorists, he put some of their speeches just before they got hanged in the book, because they refused to apologise. And in it, they compare themselves with the Irish, like, what are they called? Sinn Féin? I'm sure.
Sinn Féin.
Sinn Féin or whatever. And they compare themselves with that because they're saying, the British are oppressing the Irish, and so too the British are here oppressing us, and it's like our brothers in Sinn Féin, which is just...
It was Sinn Féin, there's a moment in history in Sinn Féin, the political party, that's now almost got a majority in Ireland because they've done a very good job of campaigning on housing affordability in hipster suburbs. I know you're very bitter about hipsters more than anyone. Like we're just talking about terrorists and everything. Blah 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 blah. They go, hipsters. No, I am talking about the history. There's a moment in time when Sinn Féin stopped supporting the comrades you're talking about in your book that you're reading now, and flip sides.
Yeah.
And to this day, in Belfast, they're still waving the Palestinian flags above the Catholic pubs because that's who they associate with now as the underdogs, I guess. But yeah, once upon a time, they were so supportive of the Jewish people in Israel, and you see that with all struggles around the world. I guess you get the West Papuan flag in some of these communities as well. And what's the Spanish?
I know.
Separatists.
What are they called? They make those bicycles that hipsters ride. There's this, they really do. There's this famous bicycle that all the hipsters are riding in Sydney, and they're made Basques, the Basque separatists.
The Basques, yeah.
Yeah, the Basques are the ones who make the bicycles.
I remember when we interviewed you last time in Melbourne pre-lockdown, and I'll use that photo to promote this podcast, actually, when we were allowed to, stand next to each other. But yeah, we're just standing in a suburban street in Flemington, and we saw a man walking past just in this light industrial area who looked like Nick Cave. And I remember you saying, I really wish that man didn't walk past, because this is what you're going to take from Melbourne. This is what a stranger looks like in his three-piece suit with a side fringe.
Might have even been Nick Cave. Who knows?
Yeah. Now, I imagine you are still keeping tabs on some of the proud Aussie patriots that you once...
not really, because as soon as I put the book out and I had to start on my new book, I sort of muted pretty much everyone, just because it takes over your head. Mm-hmm. And it was a good amateur lesson in psychology for me, that obviously spending a year or longer than a year kind of being really caught up with following all the minutiae of all these far-right groups and far-left groups and Muslim groups, like just muting them. And then in 3 days I stopped thinking about it all. And then I started following pro-vapers and cigarette companies for my new book. And then in 3 days, those little soap operas had taken over my head. And suddenly I'm walking around the streets sort of forgetting that, oh no, the soap opera between that particular vape campaigner and that particular vape campaigner where they're bitching at each other, no one knows what the hell that is, but it totally kind of taken over my brain. But what would you like to ask anyway, despite that?
We'll get into Puff Piece, your new book, in a second, because that's obviously the new universe that you've gone down. But I was wondering if you'd seen the pressure valve of racial kind of divisions, that we saw come to light under the rise of ISIS.
Yeah.
We saw, a hark back to that kind of skinheads Aussie pride thing. If you've seen those people devolve into hang Bill Gates kind of
I really think there was always that overlap. Even when I was hanging out with these anti-Muslim far-right people, whilst the leaders were definitely like that, sometimes I'd talk to just some rando in the crowd, and that just was not what their impression of what the rally was about. It was more... So I remember this one woman, and I was saying, well, why are you here at this rally, like run by... And, you know, I won't say their names because they love it when you say their names, but, you know, run by the... you know, the white nationalists, the hang Hitler poster in every classroom guys.
Yeah.
I said to her, I go, well, why are you at this rally? And she goes, oh, there's a big ice problem in my area. And these guys said they'll help clear up the ice problem. And I was like, hang on, what's this got to do with Islam or black people or anything like that? And she was totally sincere, and she was talking about... At the moment, she's couch surfing because she had to leave her house because her partner was violent. And, you know, so then that's like a totally different picture of than you get if it's just like a bunch of 1,000 Ku Klux Klansmen who are marching in the streets of Bendigo.
Yeah. It's not even a theory that One Nation bleeds from Labor voters. As we saw in the last Queensland election, the Labor landslide, the slide up there at Palaszczuk, it was all to the detriment of One Nation candidates. They bled back. So, you know, it's not hard to see that social issues, when no one's speaking to them, kind of direct people to populism, which is always exciting. What I'm trying to figure out is I've seen a lot of people who were once popular for their populist opinions, be that about race or religion or whatever kind of bigoted kind of theories they were throwing around. And we've seen it same with the Murdoch firebrands, you know. It's been very easy for them to pivot into anti-mask, anti-vaccine.
Oh, yeah, it's so amazing how people can just erase their past. And I guess if you're younger, you might not be aware of, like, how some of these, like, Murdoch conservatives or just in general, you know, how they just had anti-populist opinions and like for instance, they were all pro the Iraq war, and now if you were just young and you like turned on, you know, Fox for the first time and watched Tucker Carlson and that kind of crowd, you'd think, you know, because they're always they're like anti-establishment now, and they criticize the deep state and they criticize the Pentagon. It's like, it's really confusing for someone my age to like watch Tucker Carlson because he's like attacking Amazon for underpaying workers, and it's like, what's going? I'm confused. This is hard because and you know, and people will argue that he's just doing it totally for cynical reasons, and it's like, okay, well, fine, but that makes it also interesting. You know what I mean? Like, why do you have to go on Fox News to hear someone, you know, have someone in the mainstream like take on Amazon and how they treat their workers? Because for some reason, in some little mixture of interests, and you're not going to get it on the more nominally left mainstream channels like CNN and stuff.
Yeah, because they love their books arriving on time.
Yes. So, I better be careful what I say, or else my box of puff piece will be lost. In the big factory.
We have seen that, though. You see, you know, Sky News After Dark, which is full of some of the greatest minds in Australian media, rallying against masks and lockdowns and dictatorship, and then obviously that reaches a boiling point, like we saw last weekend, where, you know, there's a lot of online conspiracy as well. But if you're taking a little bit of online conspiracy or a lot of online conspiracy in your media diet, and then you turn on the television and you've got someone who you've been listening to for 40 years, like Alan Jones, kind of reaffirming that, it's no surprise these people march. But what is the surprise is the next day when the same media company, News Corp, put on the front pages, COVID idiots, you know, lockdown lunatics. It's like, you guys kind of played a pretty big role in getting these people here.
Do you know what I thought strange about the whole mask thing is that Donald Trump, he set this reality that the mask is somehow an infringement on your rights. So it's not like there's this precedent in history of like, oh, remember back 10 years ago, 30 years ago, when that whole mask thing came up and we decided that wearing the mask is left wing and not wearing the mask is right wing. Like, I just think, for instance, Donald Trump could have said the story when this all exploded, this COVID, could have said, oh, you know why there's not enough masks? It's because the left and the deep state, they want you all to, like, catch the COVID, and that's why they're not giving you masks. And so he could have, like, set the agenda that somehow wearing a mask was right-wing and for liberty. And so he had so much power, and but he just went the other way, and then it was became like a partisan issue in a weird way.
He didn't think like 10 steps ahead on that one.
Yeah.
Like I reckon he could have claimed masks.
Yeah. He could have made masks Republican masks. This is what Thomas Jefferson would want us to do. And
there was a lot of treading water, though. I do remember last year him saying, I'm hoping to open up the economy by Easter, like 2 weeks from lockdown. I remember thinking, I don't know. And then it turns out they had a lot more ahead of them. Now, I want to read you something here just before we get into Puff Piece.
Sure.
As someone who kind of studies extremism, have you always, or is this a new thing? Have you seen this before? This kind of thing. We're looking at these hippies in, the people that were actually on the front line of anti-vaxxer, anti-science, the very, very well off, I guess you'd say, comfortable middle class hippies that veer into this kind of medical skepticism, this anti-vaccine rhetoric. They're really crossing over with these right-wing kind of extremists that are kind of really pumping out the numbers online with the conspiracies. We saw it with Pete Evans when he kind of got brushed from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here because he put up a Nazi symbol, which kind of no one really saw coming. He posted that online. But I'm watching this woman, I won't say her name because, as you said earlier, it's a similar kind of thing. This is a prominent influencer from Byron Bay. She posts this, a linen influencer. Our freedom is not a joke. To anyone that is handing it over blindly, please stop. Educate yourself. Come home to your intuition. Make up your own beliefs and opinions and do not falter. Be ready to admit that you may have made mistakes in the past. Be kind. Don't judge one another. Remember, science is a theory, just like magic. Pay attention to how history often repeats itself.
So, yeah, I wish I'd done a course in logic and logic fallacies, because sometimes people say things to me and I can almost, like, a quarter of my brain can kind of start unpicking what's going on there. But yeah, maybe in the next book I should stop reading books about terrorists and start reading about logic fallacies. It's definitely like something. So one of the things she's playing on is that there's different layers to things. So maybe on one layer it is true you should be open-minded and want freedom. Yes, that's cool, but that's not the only layer, and maybe balanced up with all these other layers, you don't arrive at...
But the hippies, the crossover of the hippies and the Nazis, is that a new thing?
No, yes, it's sort of going in the mainstream, or more in the mainstream, yes. There was always this weird thing of... Because, Nazis really like purity, and Nazis were big environmentalists, kept all the soil very fertile around Auschwitz.
Putting
and stuff
the
like
conservation in conservative.
But there's a whole thing around that kind of Nazism and kind of like hygiene and cleanliness. And so, yeah, but it used to, back when I was young, when I first used to be reading about the far right, that was like an exciting little fringe. Like, you'd find some real, like, sincere environmentalists, but they were also Nazis or whatever, and it was just like my mind's exploded and stuff. But now it's become more normal. But even like Charles Manson, who wanted to cleanse the earth of this and that or whatever, he also spoke through the vector of environmentalism and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's always been that, but yeah, now it's kind of just rolling into our feed a lot more.
Now, I'll take the opportunity now to pivot from kind of grassroots conspiracies to major corporate ones, and I'll start by pulling out this little device in my pocket.
Ah, yes.
Which is a Pog Orange Guava flavoured e-cigarette.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a puff. It's got some kind of arousing Asian fruit flavours.
Ah, yes.
Which you certainly don't get with a pouch of Champion Ruby.
I would have brought my vape from the shoebox in my kitchen had I known you were going to. I've only got my Philip Morris device here that's not a vape.
And that's how you start your new book, Puff Piece.
Yeah.
The Philip Morris device is not a vape.
Yeah.
But it can be used as a vape.
Well, it's not a vape as we understand what a vape would be. For one, probably the biggest reason is that what kills you in a conventional cigarette is the tar that's generated by a cigarette, and a vape doesn't contain tar. So therefore, even if vapes pose other health dangers, they don't pose that one danger that cigarettes do.
That we know about.
Yeah, that cigarettes do, right? On the other hand, this new Philip Morris doohickey, which I have here, that it does generate tar. So therefore, I mean, that seems to be a big reason it's not a vape.
Okay, so it's still doing the same shit.
And yeah, and also Philip Morris also say it's not a vape. They're very tricky about it because. So anyway, just to explain to all this, here I've got this thing here. Do you see that?
Yeah, that's not a cigarette.
Are you saying that's not a cigarette, or are you just asking? You're going, that's not a cigarette?
Show me it again.
Okay, just like, hang on. Where's oh, there's the camera.
A bit higher.
There you go. Look at that.
Yeah.
How much does that look like a cigarette?
A lot. It looks like a short, unfiltered one.
No, yeah, it's tobacco wrapped in paper with a filter at one end that you plant between your lips, and you inhale nicotine and tobacco and tar into your lungs. But they say this isn't a cigarette. And the reason they came up with this is because, well, one example is in Europe last year, they banned menthol cigarettes across Europe. You can't produce them, you can't sell them, you can't buy them. And I think they would have wanted to ban all cigarettes, but, you've got to start somewhere, and menthol are the ones that young people and people who don't yet smoke are likely to use as a gateway. So the European Union bans them. They're banned. And then Philip Morris are like, oh, okay, sure, we'll go along with this ban. And then they go, oh, by the way, we've got this new product. It's called a heat stick. And and then everyone looks at it and goes, hang on, it just looks like exactly what you said. It's tobacco rolled in paper with a filter at one end that you plant between your lips, inhaling nicotine and tobacco into your lungs. But they say it's not a cigarette, it's a heat stick.
Do you light it?
Well, this is where it gets into the little finicky distinctions. But then, the two wild things about this, before I get into that, is one is it worked. Is that, the European Union has spent so many years trying to snuff out menthol cigarettes, and then Philip Morris just come along with this, and just by rewording it to a heat stick, they got through the ban, and it's so. And it's wildly, it's almost... Are
they selling?
Pardon?
Are they selling well?
Yeah, well, you can't really... Nothing against... I don't want to sound mean to Philip Morris, God knows. But you can't... They say yes, but, honestly, just say... Imagine if you had, the most sketchiest girlfriend or boyfriend who you never trusted, and everything they say you're suspicious of, and they've lied. You've caught them lying 100 times or whatever. That's like Philip Morris. It's almost like there's that joke where it's hello, she lied, and then, but in the case of Philip Morris, it's it's not even that word. It's as soon as they just go, anything they say, you've got to be so suspicious. It's not the actual reality. So they say they're selling well, but what do we know or whatever? But
the fact is that they're able to sell them.
Yeah. And it's cigarettes are this issue that just seems like such an out of the zeitgeist social justice issue, because it just seems like this thing from the 70s, yellowing women's weekly magazines in a garage or whatever. That seems like the smoking issue, and we just we vaguely remember maybe Paul Hogan or something like that into it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is still the biggest killer of people, in the world. 8 million people die, and the hospital system in Australia, 1.7 million of the beds each year. It's just smoking. It's it's both still the biggest thing, but so out of the zeitgeist compared with what other things which are kind of reasonable. I'm not having a go at these other things but things like trans rights or Black Lives Matter or things like that. Like the cigarette issue just seems like the total opposite out of the zeitgeist thing or whatever.
It's no net 2030 climate change.
Or climate change or whatever. But it's still like the biggest public health crisis. So it's totally bizarre to me that somehow Philip Morris, like finally there was going to be the hugest pushback against cigarettes. Like they were going to get the biggest black eye they've ever got over their so far their life as a cigarette company, which is banning all of menthol cigarettes across Europe. And then they just were like, oh yeah, okay, we've got these menthol heat sticks, and the legislation just wasn't written for what do we do if they change the word cigarette to heat stick. And
is that basically like? Explain to me what is the difference in the heat stick?
So this is what they'll say. This is what they'll say. Everything's this misdirection where, and I know this. I was writing the book, and I kept on getting confused and going down rabbit holes or whatever. So the thing I've done different to how they would present it is I presented you this thing, the heat stick, and we're all going, oh, that just looks like a cigarette. So they wouldn't even bring this up, right? They've got this device here, and it's called an IQOS. And
looks like a pen.
Yeah, it looks like a pen, and so what happens is that they make this what they're selling, like in your mind, like it's like, oh, we've got this new thing, and it's got a little flashing light on it. So what it is, it's like this fat, cool looking pen, and then you shove it into this handheld charger device, which is also pretty funky and cool looking. So it doesn't look like some
like a sunglasses case.
Yes, and so then they kind of they start telling you all about this, and they start so you think this is the product, and so this is already the first like major misdirection because, you know, for the sake of you not dying of lung cancer, this cigarette is, or what they call not a cigarette, is the product. But they've already kind of got you on this, so you start going, oh, and it kind of looks like a bit like a vape, and you know, it's like an e-cigarette, and then kind of gets lost in that world a bit. So Philip Morris do this really clever thing because a vape is also an e-cigarette, and this, I guess, in so much as it gets plugged in to this thing that heats up the heat stick, I guess that's an e-cigarette in a way. So then Philip Morris do this really clever thing of if there's any research, if any doctor or politician or whoever says something positive about vaping, and says, well, you know, like for instance, you know, like vaping is actually healthier than cigarettes because they don't have tar or whatever. Philip Morris implies that their thing is an e-cigarette like a vape. But then, when there was like the vape crisis in America where kids were dying and others going to hospital because they were sucking up on these vapes that had tainted juice within them. Then suddenly Philip Morris go, oh, well, no, our thing isn't a vape. It's totally different. It's a
heat stick.
Yeah, it's a heat stick. So they get to kind of play it both ways. So
basically they've built a device where you put something that looks a lot like a cigarette inside of it, and it smokes it for you.
Yeah. Well, so what happens is they say that it heats the heat stick to an incredible degree that it's going to generate a discharge, which they call aerosol, but they say it never actually catches a light, and because it doesn't catch a light, technically speaking, according to them, it's not generating smoke, because they say, at least initially, until you kind of corner them, they say that the thing that kills you in a cigarette is the smoke. The smoke comes about because you light the cigarette and it burns. This doesn't ever actually burn, so therefore it's only heating up to an incredible degree, and therefore this discharge that comes out of it that kind of seems a bit like smoke isn't actually smoke, and therefore it's not smoke, so therefore it's a better alternative to cigarettes. And they're very clever, they'll never actually say healthier or safer because they can't, because they can't, and because that would be making a medical claim that they can't back up, and they also probably don't want to back up, because then they want it to be this consumer device that's sold at the 7-Eleven and at Coles. They don't want it to be this medical device that you go to the doctor and then have to go to a pharmacy through or whatever. So their first thing is it's not smoke. Mm-hmm. And they say it's not smoke because something has to combust for it to be smoke. But this isn't. I mean, I could just rabbit on all day, so I'll just stop at this one point, just showing how they're very tricky. But I read up, because I know nothing about science, so I had to really do a lot of research and talk to scientists and doctors and stuff. So in a conventional cigarette, it's not the burning that generates smoke. It's this process just right before the burning called pyrolysis, and that generates the smoke in a conventional cigarette. So therefore, following that through, the fact that this doesn't combust, this heat stick, according to Philip Morris, even if that's true, it doesn't combust. It does do that pyrolysis thing. So therefore, it could possibly still be smoke. So they're already kind of being very tricky, even on, and it just keeps on going on and on, where they say one thing, and the more you dig into it, you realise it's one more misdirection.
Have you found them ever since the kind of anti-smoking kind of campaigning began, and we went very heavy here in Australia particularly. We had a health minister who'd lost a father to smoking. Kevin Rudd backed her all the way to plain packaging and taxes, and the taxes are still going up, which in itself is a social issue that we could go down that rabbit hole and kind of talk about how there's some kids eating cornflakes for dinner because mum and dad just are so hooked on these cigarettes and just keep paying even when the taxes go up. But we did experience a big drop off, a huge drop off. It's just not worth it for the young kids now. Even though we have seen vapes fill that void. If you've walked past a train station recently, you've seen kids smoking all kinds of disposables and rechargeables and whatever in almost at the same volume, if not more, of kids smoking durries down in the 90s. But the fact of the matter is, Philip Morris and British American Tobacco and all the big boys must have taken a whack. Do you have any numbers in how the anti-smoking movement has affected their business? Well, that's why Philip Morris have had to come up with this, because it's for markets where cigarettes are just seen in as just disgusting things. That LA, in LA and stuff like that. So they're coming up with this reality, going, well, God knows this isn't a cigarette, but they're still at the moment wherever they can sell cigarettes, like around the world, and where there's just countries where they're not as in disrepute amongst the public or whatever, and they just keep on selling it there, and then they're just going to keep on selling it until they're told not to sell it over there. But so this is very much them reacting to the anti-smoke. Like, this is another thing I should explain. The reason I got into this story in the first place is I saw these full-page ads in the newspaper where Philip Morris were claiming they were shutting down as a cigarette company. Yeah, what was the terminology they used? Unsmoke the world. Unsmoke the world. We're changing. Are you? Yeah. Is that kind of the the high horse? And so their pitch at the moment is they're not even a cigarette company. They're an anti-cigarette company. They're a health enterprise who are trying to get the 1 billion smokers of the world off cigarettes. And then it's like, what? Huh? So I read that. I was like, what is this? I don't understand. Because it did sound like the South African government under apartheid, like just throwing in the towel and saying, oh, listen, we're giving up. We realise it's an evil empire. We are now an anti-racism government. Yeah. So I was going, is that what's happening here? Has Philip Morris, the Marlboro guys, the world's biggest cigarette company, are they doing something similar where it's just like they're sincere, like they're going to give it all up? But then you dig a little deeper and it's like, oh, the way we can help out, we're not just going to abandon you to having to quit by yourself. So we've got this device, the heat stick and the IQOS, and that's going to help you move on to a better alternative. And so that's what they mean. So they're trying to move. So then it becomes a real insane mind. I don't want to say the F word, but, messing with your mind or whatever, because they've created a reality where they're both the world's biggest cigarette company. I think they put out, God, is it 800 billion cigarettes a year? I think like 800 billion, so close to 1 trillion cigarettes a year. So on the one hand, they do that. On the other hand, because of this IQOS and this heat stick, which they claim isn't a cigarette and which they claim they're trying to get people away from their cigarettes, they get to pitch themselves as being against smoking and being in sync with the World Health Organization, being in sync with Greg Hunt's, health policy of trying to and it's like, we're on the same side. We're trying to get people off cigarettes. But of course, for that to be true, like the little thing is you have to agree that this isn't a cigarette.
It just seems like it's tobacco rolled in paper with a filter at one end that generates tar. So why is it not a cigarette? And you can see how successful they are at it. I'm looking at this thing in The Guardian today, and the article it says, tobacco firm Philip Morris calls for ban on cigarettes within decades. And it's got the CEO saying cigarettes should be outlawed, cigarettes should be treated like petrol cars, we've got to blah, 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 blah. So the whole that only makes sense if you're going to go along with their reality that this heat stick isn't a cigarette. But the way that, and I'm not having a go at The Guardian or whatever, but to even explain their story, like for The Guardian, they have to kind of somehow
take the pill.
Yeah, they have to go along with their reality and say and agree that Philip Morris are saying this, whether they're really going to do it. They are saying this and
take the blue pill.
Yes,
I should say. Yeah. Where else did you get to? I mean, that was fascinating in itself. It actually seems like an exercise to remain relevant and to further their anti-smoking brand, because I can't see, given the option of a disposable vape like the one I have here, which they sell everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I picked this one up in Toowoomba. They were all smoking them in the pubs in Toowoomba. They still anywhere. It's a grey market thing, but every newsagent is selling them. But given the option of this or that 3-piece contraption, you've just kind of, I don't think anyone on the go is going to grab that and invest in the machine and the charger and that almost feels like it was just a ploy to push this brand as the anti-smoking company. Have they made any moves on anything more chic, like the Juul?
Well, or their American branch did buy into Juul, so I think they own. I don't know what it is. Whether it's Ford.
Juul's the real USB one.
Yeah, the USB one.
So big one.
This is my kind of op-ed, obviously. But my impression is that Philip Morris really want to go ahead with the heat stick and other products that are tobacco based, because vapes have no tobacco in them, and so almost like from almost a shareholder perspective, of like they have to tell their shareholders how they're going to keep their company alive. They want their future business to be around tobacco. Yeah. As opposed to vaping, because vaping's got no tobacco. And then another reason for that is that vaping, just anyone can do it. It's pretty open source and it's pretty cheap and easy for anyone to set up a vape company. And so they like this because it's proprietorial and it's going to be harder or it would be nigh impossible. Like people aren't going to be able to make heat sticks in their, garage like they can make vape juice and stuff. So I think even though there are examples like of Philip Morris dabbling in vaping as vaping, I think it's a bit of a side issue. I mean, I can't prove that or anything, but...
So I guess the nicotine gets added to the tobacco.
No, the nicotine is naturally in the tobacco. So therefore, when you have nicotine in vape juice, that's because it's been extracted from the tobacco and...
Yeah, right.
And then again, if there's some real kind of pedant nerd word who's like trying to trip me up, they might go, well, technically speaking, nicotine is tobacco or whatever, but it's an aspect of tobacco, and it's good to divide them into two, because it's the tobacco that is like giving you the lung cancer. It's not the nicotine. The nicotine is what keeps you addicted to the danger, as opposed to being the danger itself.
And the nicotine is, for the most part, unless you're one of those types who love puffing on a cigar for the therapeutic sense, the nicotine is what most people enjoy in a cigarette. Is that the reward systems that
I guess you might know more about this, seeing you're the one with the vape or whatever.
I picked this one up before our little chat, and I can tell you, I can see why the kids are hooked on it. It's certainly marketed to them with the flavours and the fruit, and they've got bubble gum and berry floss and all kinds of shit. But yeah, it is interesting. Like, is there any way of extracting nicotine from anywhere else in the world that doesn't involve tobacco?
No, I don't think so. But I don't think. I mean, I'm basing this on, because I want to be really careful. Like, obviously, I'm not a doctor or whatever, and you should just triple fact check everything. But like, for instance, if you go down to Chemist Warehouse, you can just buy nicotine chewing gum without a prescription, and I think you don't even have to be 18 or whatever. So. And, Australia is really strict with medical things. It's not like we're some crazy country where, like, they're really strict, the TGA and the government over things. So clearly they think that nicotine in certain forms isn't the danger. Having said that, an asterisk after that, from what I understand, although I don't know nearly anything about it, I think there is some research where people are saying nicotine in and of itself can pose some sort of danger. But generally speaking, when people talk about or think about cigarettes, it's not the nicotine that's giving them the lung cancer, it's the tobacco.
It's the tobacco and the smell and the gross and the indoors and the secondhand smoke and all that kind of conversation comes.
The other thing I should add, for some reason I'd forgotten to put this in or whatever, but we're talking about vaping or whatever. I mean, that's the other reason for this heat stick and the IQOS is it's Philip Morris not just responding to the world of government bans, it's them responding to the world of vaping. So in a lot of ways, the IQOS and the heat stick is Philip Morris taking on vaping, like entering that world without being a vape itself and trying to get people to choose the IQOS and the heat stick. But if you're getting confused, IQOS is just a device that heats up the heat stick, because I know I don't want to sound like I'm some jargon guy who kind of like, hey man, everyone spent the last year and a half writing a book about
no, but explain how that's spelt, because it's got the trendy kind of spelling. It's
IQOS. And in fact, I think they go IQOS. I think they like it like that. But I was like 3/4 of the way through my audio book, and I'd been saying IQOS the whole time. And I was like, bad luck, Philip Morris. It's like in Australia, my version's probably going to catch on. So, and it's IQOS. And there's a theory that it used to stand for, they called it that because I quit ordinary smoking. I think it was I quit.
Okay.
But then what happened is that somewhere down the path they decided, we want our angle to be this has nothing to do with smoking, it doesn't smoke and blah 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 blah. So then they decided that it doesn't stand for that, and so therefore if you ask them now why is it called IQOS, they go, nothing, no reason, no reason.
Yeah, it's just they kept the acronym but eliminated what it stood for. What have you found as you kind of explored this brave new world of ingesting nicotine? I mean, there's all that stuff you can talk about, the secondhand smoke. I remember it was a big coup. I remember when they banned smoking in pubs, it was like, of course, that was so hard to argue against that, because you look at someone who doesn't smoke cigarettes, works behind a bar for 20 years, they're going to be so fucked from that because they're taking in more smoke than anyone who smokes. And then at that point, back in the day, they probably took smoke breaks as well. So that's obviously going to fuck them up. But you look at nicotine, and it's such a still to this day such a common place in society that we kind of overlook. As you mentioned before, it's still the number one killer in so many countries. And I know when they banned smoking, Queensland was the first. They banned smoking in prisons. Assaults went up 500% in Arthur Gorrie Correctional Centre when they banned cigarettes. Then they replaced them with patches and lozenges, which created the same currency of which cigarettes held. People start using that stuff to barter inside prison, and because it's just the nicotine at the end of the day. If anyone follows Spanion on Instagram, who's a kind of a modern day chopper read who kind of talks about the life and times of being in and out of prison, he was saying there was a moment there where they were crushing up the lozenges, mixing them with tea leaves and smoking them like bongs. And obviously the biggest way to limit smoking after banning smoking in prison was to take lighters away, and that's now considered contraband. So they managed to use tissue papers and a few paper clips, and they'll light off a PowerPoint and then punch a bong through a water bottle of crushed up lozenge with tea leaves. And in some cases they'll also just scrape up a cigarette patch into little dots and mix that with tea leaves and smoke that like a cigarette with a page from the Bible or Quran. Like, that is true addiction.
Oh, yeah.
And people forget that. And of course these vapes that contain nicotine are just going to come roaring back into society, because it doesn't matter. All you needed to do was provide a counter to the culture that had shifted away from, can you please not smoke next to me? And you sit in a bar nowadays outside of lockdown, and quite often you'll see someone puffing indoors on a vape or an IQOS, and the bar staff aren't even You know, the bar staff are 20-year-olds, so they don't even remember the days of that being a faux pas. Yeah, what have you kind of seen in this social shift that kind of has allowed, you know, they'd almost stamped it out, nicotine intake as a social kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I do talk to this guy who works at a prison in Melbourne in my book or whatever, and yeah, he said basically what you did, where like there's been a cigarette ban for 5 years, but there hasn't been a cigarette ban for 5 years because people will just get what they need to get by any means necessary. And this dude said, yeah, he found it interesting that the people in prison will have had access to all sorts of drugs, from heroin to speed, whatever, yet the one that they really can't give up and that they prioritise and that costs the most is tobacco, so that there must be just something about it that just is harder than other drugs.
I mean, the fact that they banned cigarettes was always, you know, something that you could just laugh at because they haven't been able to stop heroin and ice from getting into prison. So, I mean,
and it's easier because it's less consequential for the person who's smuggling it in. Like even on like for me, if someone said to me, "Hey John, can you take this cake of heroin and just drive it around the corner and drop it out at this guy's house," I'd be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But if you were like, "Okay, can you take these ciggies around?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure," or whatever. So the fact that in our minds cigarettes and tobacco seems lower stake than heroin and coke or whatever, that's another reason why it's able to get into prison, because people are more willing to take the risk. Like you're not going to...
It lives on. And you see some of these old crims that were once in the drug game and probably still are, often, and these gangs that they're associated with getting arrested with black market cigarettes often.
Yeah.
You know, with finding truckloads of, black market Chinese Marlboros or whatever else, or even just completely new name, like branded cigarettes that no one's ever heard of. Because at the end of the day, it's an addiction that I guess the only way to break it down is years and years and years of campaigning against it. But
that's what will be the confusing thing with vaping, because again, it's got the nicotine, but the nicotine's is making you addicted to some other danger in the vape. So the real danger in the vape, if they're, what level it is, I don't know, but is that you're inhaling these, first of all, like steam, which you shouldn't, and I think it's called propylene glycerol. I really should guarantee I can pronounce those words before babbling like I'm an expert. I'll just call it PG. And vegetable glycerol and flavourings and colour. So it's the inhaling of that is likely to be, if there is a danger, which I imagine...
we'll find eventually.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so tricky about talking about vaping compared with the heat stick and the IQOS. The heat stick and the IQOS, it's like it's generating tar. You're inhaling tar into your lungs just like a cigarette. So it's simpler to just have a statement. Whilst, like what the hell's going on there? Like you shouldn't put tar into your lungs, right? But then, the thing with vaping that's kind of confusing, and this is like going to be an answer that both sides will hate, because I really should either be kind of one or the other, and this is, I'm being sincere here. I'm not like trying to be a, what do you call it? What did you call me before? Like some kind of, always trying to start a fight?
Contrarian?
Contrarian. I'm not trying to be a contrarian, but if someone was
betraying your base.
Yeah, betraying my base. If someone was addicted to cigarettes and then they spent, like, let's say 6 months or 9 months or something, where they'll wean themselves off cigarettes using vaping, and then at the end of that 9 months or that year, like you put both cigarettes and the vaping to one side, so you don't do either. Then in that context, you could see how vaping could be seen as a kind of a helpful medicinal tool or whatever, because it's helping get a person off cigarettes. But then on the other hand, it seems like if you're just going to be huffing all day on a vape for the next 10 years, seems like a pretty big roll of the dice that there's not going to be some research done that says, well, actually, your
arm's going to fall off.
Like some, that actually also will kind of deal you some fairly major respiratory problems. So, and then in that case, if you're just going to be huffing on a vape all day for the next 10 years, like, is it really safer than a cigarette in that context? If it's like, well, I didn't get the lung cancer that I would have got from the cigarettes, but I did get this respiratory disease that's also going to kill me, but it's a different way. So,
and no one knows how to treat it. Yeah. Well, you are dealing with a dark, I guess you could say, industry. Mm. Did you encounter the same in writing this book? Because you pry, that's what you do, John, is you pry and you kind of disarm people, and they end up telling you a bit more than they should, and then of course you leave them red-faced. Uh-oh. And I noticed with you, that's what you mean by extremists. So you ended up getting a few threats from people who'd realised that they'd given too much away. Mm. Did you find any of that, like, big tobacco, shadow government type shit?
Yes. So I'm very curious when the book's read about certain things, whether they're going to catch a light or whatever. Mm. But yeah, there was the vape inquiry. So it was the inquiry last year into what was it called? Anyway, it was basically the vape inquiry, the Senate inquiry, and there were 6 politicians on it, 6 senators, 2 were Labor, 2 were Liberal, and then I think there was
Central Alliance.
Yeah, Central Alliance, and someone else or whatever. So generally, except for 2 people, they're all a bit against it, or quite against vaping. But then there were these 2 Liberals who were for it, or Liberal Nationals, and everyone who appeared before the inquiry, like most of the politicians were very sus, like, this sounds like it's a thing of, like, Big Tobacco supporting this, and that you're speaking on behalf of Big Tobacco and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I feel nauseous just speaking about it. But yeah, I kind of just felt, I found out that, well, it's in the book, so goddamn, I can't hide from it now. But yeah, like Philip Morris were in some ways
backgrounding you,
pulling the strings behind helped organise the vape Senate inquiry, and they were in the inquiry without being in the inquiry, because because Philip Morris could never sit in that inquiry because no one trusts Philip Morris, and even people who are like pro vaping, they're like, whoa, we've got to, we can't be seen with Philip Morris. And then I just sort of found out that they probably were. So I'm really fascinated with that bit of the book, whether like the Liberal Nationals or Philip Morris are going to come past me in a pickup truck, and I'll be the first person to be killed by Philip Morris, but not buy their cigarettes. So I'm just sort of like just confused with what the media and the news is interested in, because like in some parallel universe, it's like I've really got this gotcha kind of front page of the Age expose of Philip Morris being in the shadows of this Senate inquiry and not revealing that, not only not to the public, but not to the politicians on the panel on the Senate inquiry either. So either they'll be exciting and everyone will be like, hey, Safran, you got a really cool exclusive, or else it's like, we're in this 24/7 news cycle where like it'll just get lost in it all, you know what I mean? Because Britney Spears will
something's happened there,
shave her hair or something,
So I would love to know what a tobacco company lobbyist looks like nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we've all seen Thank You for Smoking, but would you imagine that there was someone like that, a smooth haircut, blonde man?
Well, I did have lunch. I ended up having lunch with a Philip Morris executive, and he was, he was good looking. I'm not hitting on him. I found this when I was writing my book. I'm really bad at describing people, because it either sounds like I'm insulting them or trying to hit on them. I just don't know how to... there's something about my writing that whatever I write, it's like, and he has a long, lush beard, or so. There's just something. And I actually had my editor at Penguin say to me I was describing this woman, and I said, and I just go, listen, how do I describe her? I go, she's as pale and as blue-eyed and as blonde hair as me, but... her face is more symmetrical or something like that. And his comment was like, Jesus, cut this out. This sounds really like sleazy, like you're cracking on to her or whatever. But then there's the other side where it's really, or I sound like I'm insulting them.
He had a face like a kicked-in Bicky tin.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was the Philip Morris executive. He was handsome.
He was a hunk. Yeah.
Nice broad shoulders and everything. I actually met people from another big tobacco company as well, but then when I was writing the book, it just didn't seem to make sense to put them in. It's a bit like, when you're Batman after the Joker or something like that. Like, you can't suddenly for one scene be like chasing after the Riddler or something like that. So that had to like all be on the cutting room floor. So it's just like me chasing after the Dragon, the Marlboro people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do you like my gear, by the way?
The Marlboro shirt is top tier. It's
I've been buying all this stuff for the press tour, all this like Marlboro and Philip Morris merch to wear, because I just thought, so much fun. I've never grown out of that thing of when I was like really little and doing dress-ups, like when I was like 6 years old with the next door neighbour and putting on a show, and I'm like, oh, this is so great. I get to dress up. And
we'll have to get him in an Akubra for the Marlboro man.
This is my other thing that I've ordered from overseas. You'll see it's... are you familiar with Mission Winnow?
No.
So when Philip Morris, when they were banned from putting their Marlboro logo on their Formula One cars and on their drivers, they said, oh, okay, sure. And they go, oh, listen, we've set up this other company, and God knows it's got nothing to do with cigarettes. It's called Mission Winnow. And then they put all like Mission Winnow on all the cars and on all the drivers, and no one knew what it meant or whatever. And I think they had to do a bit of reverse engineering once everyone was like, really, like, what does this mean? And they say it's a portal for having open discussions about ideas. Like, well, I don't even know what that means. So the only connective tissue I could make to, like, why is this in their interest is that their argument for the IQOS and the heat stick is like, we've got to be open-minded, we've got to look to the future, and, and they make these claims themselves. They say there used to be petrol cars and now there's electric cars, and so too, there used to be a cigarette. Now there's a heat stick.
Yeah, and it sponsors electric cars in the Formula One. Yeah. Oh, well, I would also love to read the edition before the lawyers got hold of it, because it sounds like you made a lot of editors and publishers nervous in writing this book. But yeah, I do have the copy you sent me, so I'm going to finish it up.
Have you got? Do you have a hard copy or just a?
No, we've got the one with Betoota Advocate watermarked across every page.
Oh, okay, but it's like it's not the book. It's just the.
No, it's digital.
Oh, digital. Okay, I was just curious whether they've pressed those up yet. So this was a bit of like irrelevant side business to the listener, who I'm sure they're not interested in.
No, we'll get our hands on a copy. But yeah, it sounds like an exciting read, and it's going to take us down those same rabbit holes that only John Safran can find. And I'm very interested now that this one's done and you're going to mute this soap opera, where you're heading next.
Oh yes.
I think QAnon's been done to death.
Yeah.
It's been deplatformed, but I'd like to see Safran putting on the linen, heading up to the Northern Rivers and getting to the bottom of this, I guess, index of the anti-vax movement in Australia.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll take on suggestions.
Mullumbimby. John Safran live from Mullum. Thanks for joining us, mate.
No, thank you very much.
Puff Piece out now by John Safran.
See you, sir.